From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew. 4 years after the death of George Floyd, an effort to revive the Justice in Policing Act that failed to clear Congress the first time. We'll speak with Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas. The United Nations top court ruling today Israel must end military operations in Rafah now. The CEO of the International Rescue Committee, David Miliband, will be here to discuss the urgent humanitarian need in Gaza. And the White House releasing gasoline reserves ahead of the Memorial Day weekend. Here we are. We'll look at prices and what they mean for politics at the pump. Thanks for spending part of your Friday with us on Bloomberg TV and radio. Tomorrow marks 4 years since the death of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer in Minneapolis, sparking protests across the country and prompting legislation in Congress to reform police tactics. The George Floyd Justice in Policing Act passed the House but never went further, and it's being reintroduced this week. That's where we start our conversation now with Representative Jasmine Crockett, the Democrat from Texas, with us on this day before we mark this tragic event. And Congresswoman, I welcome you back to Bloomberg. It's good to see you. You have made reference to the murder of George Floyd as an inspiration for you to run for public office. Now that we have seen 4 years pass, is this Congress able to pass this time around the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, or has that opportunity passed?
I definitely don't think that the opportunity has passed, but as you know, this has been the most dysfunctional and unproductive Congress in the history of modern day Congresses. And I think by the time we're done, we will determine that it's been the most unproductive ever. Nevertheless, I think that there's definitely an opportunity specifically right now as we've seen the militarization of law enforcement on campuses. I think that now this has gone from being just Black Lives Matter, but it's a larger thing that more people can get around. Because one of the things that this legislation does is it does minimize the use of these weapons of war as it relates to our local law enforcement. Another thing that it does, as we've seen these images of students on campuses, is it requires that there be a national registry. So if there is any excessive force or use of force incidents that have taken place, not only would there be a national registry, but also there would be a breakdown on the racial makeup of who it was that was at the hands of it. So I think that this is actually a very opportune time to do this, but I don't have the highest hopes for this House.
Well, it's interesting. I'd like to hear from you more on that, because we've actually seen changes on the state level. We've seen states and municipalities change rules for their police forces. We've seen some ban chokeholds. Some have banned no knock warrantless, I should say. And the question comes down to why it hasn't happened on the federal level. Why is this Congress incapable?
Yeah, I can't really explain other than we need Hakeem Jeffries as our speaker, and absolutely we can get it out of the House. Because I am a freshman, I don't know what the holdup was in the Senate. I've only heard some rumblings, but until I've had an opportunity to sit down at the table, my best guess is that we were hung up simply because we have to deal with the filibuster. That is my best guess, is that because we didn't have 60 Democrats, we couldn't get it across the finish line.
So it comes down to procedure. I spoke earlier, Congresswoman, with Jonathan Jackson, Congressman from Illinois, about whether he thinks this new Justice in Policing Act can pass through Congress, and the changes that we've seen since George Floyd's murder, following a rush to embrace diversity and inclusion and what some say is a reversion to the past. Here's what he told us.
It seems like everything has changed. It seems to be a complete reversal, if you will, a retreatment and a retrenchment on corporate America's commitment to racial, social, and justice equity. We've seen in the extension of our annual budget of the budget that passed, the DEI, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office on Capitol Hill was removed from out of the building.
Congresswoman, many of the companies that adopted DEI policies since George Floyd's death and in the wake of that tragic incident have dropped them. Others who have kept them are being very quiet about it now. How come?
Yeah, this is, I absolutely agree with my colleague, Congressman Jackson, because unfortunately what we've seen is a backlash. We've seen people that, for whatever reason, harbor what I would consider to be hate in their hearts and a lack of understanding of what DEI is all about. And so what they've done is they've weaponized the government. They've decided that they would go after various companies and corporations, and now we're seeing it on our campuses as well. Unfortunately, we're seeing these moves by these state governments as well to really attack these companies and try to take them under for embracing who we are in this country, which we are a diverse nation. It's actually what makes us the amazing country that we are, is that we are a melting pot and we are a country of immigrants. But some people seem to be threatened by diversity, and instead they have decided to turn what they have decided is a threat on them and make threats on others.
Is it racism?
Well, I mean, yeah. Point blank. I mean, when you look at who it is that's pushing back, it is the Republican Party. And, part of me says that the Republican Party has been co-opted by MAGA. But what we see is this idea that diversity is bad and it's a problem. And these are the same people that had people come on January 6th to the Capitol, and we know, we've got the headlines where some of those people that were convicted were neo-Nazis. We know that they had the Proud Boys, and we know that there's been a lack of dissociation with these white supremacy groups. They are now becoming synonymous with who MAGA is, and unfortunately, MAGA is co-opting the Republican Party. I would be happy if this country could get back to a place where we had two functioning real parties of government that just disagreed but believed in governance and respect and could actually meet in the middle and get something done for the American people.
Well, I want to be careful here, Congresswoman, but there's, of course, an element of MAGA in the House of Representatives and on the Oversight Committee. And last week you were involved in a bit of a spat with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm not the first to play this back for you during an oversight hearing regarding contempt, potentially, for Attorney General Merrick Garland. Let's remind our listeners and viewers with a part of that conversation.
I'm just curious, just to better understand your ruling, if someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad-built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
A what now?
I don't know if you had a chance to tell the chairman what you meant by that, Congresswoman, but you've suggested since then that Marjorie Taylor Greene's comments were racist in the words that she chose to describe your personal appearance. This has come down to a level that's actually disrupting the functioning of Congress. What needs to happen here next?
Yeah, we just need someone that will actually enforce the rules as they're laid out in the House. It's interesting because I now know that the Republicans are very well aware of what it takes to actually enforce the rules, because that happened last week. But then this week we saw where Ranking Member McGovern, who serves on Rules Committee, for whatever reason, they shut him down, and all he was doing was addressing things that are actually factual, things that could be Googled. I'm sure Bloomberg has covered the fact that the former president is currently in trial in New York. And he referenced the reason that my hearing was so late at night was because they decided to go up. Nothing that he said was not factual, but for whatever reason, they said he was engaging in personalities with the former president, and he never, ever said anything that was non-factual, and they shut him down. And he was not allowed to speak anymore on the House floor.
His words were stricken from the record, Congresswoman. That's right, and the words that you admitted, along with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, were allowed to stay on the record, even though those personalities were two House members. Why the double standard?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and to be clear, I actually asked a parliamentary procedure specifically because I wanted the chairman to think about the hypocrisy and how bad this could go. What we've seen out of Marjorie Taylor Greene is that she's never held accountable. And so what she does is she continues to act out, whether it's bringing pornography into the Oversight Committee and showing those pictures, whether it's showing up to the State of the Union address, not only in a hat, but a MAGA hat. You're not allowed to wear hats at all. It defies the rules of decorum. Whether it's yelling at the president, whether it was this particular State of the Union or the previous one, or whether it's literally cussing out her colleague on the House floor, Lauren Boebert. Like, she does all these things and no one ever holds her to account. And it's a problem. The only time she was held accountable was when the Democrats were in control of the House and she was kicked off of her committees for her behavior. And so, you know, I don't expect anything better out of Marjorie, but I do expect better out of my chairman. And it is my hope and goal that he will do better going forward. I will say that we had another hearing on Tuesday and she failed to show up, and the hearing went over a lot smoother.
You haven't talked about that in person with her, I presume, right?
No, we don't talk. We don't talk.
Well, I hope you'll come back and talk to me again.
I will tell you that other Republicans...
Still a lot to cover. Yeah. Thank you, Congresswoman.
I was just going to say, but there's a lot of other...
I appreciate that.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Come back and see me when you have some time to talk about working as a surrogate for Joe Biden on the campaign trail. I know you're going to be spending a lot of time on the campaign, Congresswoman. Thank you for joining us on Balance of Power. Coming up, Senator Rick Scott throwing his hat in the ring for the leadership of the chamber's Republican caucus. We'll look at his chances and the potential impact next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Thanks for coming along. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee reintroducing the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act this week. As we were just discussing with the Congresswoman, what are its odds of passage this time? Bloomberg's Megan Scully joins us now. Megan, we saw this a couple of years ago pass the House. It did not move through the Senate. This is a very different Congress now in a very different climate politically. What's the future for this bill today?
I think it's very unlikely that it makes it past the House. 2 years ago, when this did pass, it was a Democratic-controlled House. Now we have Republicans in control. This is a Democratic bill, and it will likely, I suspect, not make it even through committee to get to the floor.
Isn't that something? It's the same language that already passed this body. But, of course, as we referenced the changing climate, we talked with Congresswoman Crockett about what she sees as a rolling back of this trend, commitments to DEI, for instance, on the corporate level. We've heard a rolling back in the language from lawmakers, too, haven't we?
We certainly have. And again, it's just part of this sort of change in the political dynamics, especially as we head into what is going to be a contentious presidential election where, you know, race continues to be a dominant political theme throughout, whether we're looking on the MAGA side with former President Trump or with Joe Biden and him struggling with black voters and other minorities. Absolutely true, and that's borne out in our polling here at Bloomberg. There's a fight that's about to break out here on Capitol Hill, and it's quietly gathering steam right now, and that's the leadership battle in the Senate. Mitch McConnell finally acquiescing to the reemergence of Donald Trump by stepping down as the Republican leader. Rick Scott is the most recent to throw his hat in the ring here. He spoke a little bit earlier this month outside Donald Trump's trial in New York. Remember this?
I'm here because I've known Donald Trump a long time. I knew him before I was governor. I consider him a friend. And what he is going through is just despicable.
So the senator from Florida made tracks. I think he was the first lawmaker to actually get to the courthouse in New York, started a bit of a trend here. Is he really running for this role, or does he want to influence the outcome on Donald Trump's behalf with someone else as the next leader?
You know, I think he's actually running for this role. Yeah. Remember, he did challenge at Donald Trump's behest to challenge Mitch McConnell. He got around a dozen votes at the time. McConnell soundly won that election, even though McConnell and Trump have long simmering problems in their own relationship. But Rick Scott is a very ambitious guy. He would like to be Senate Republican leader. Yeah. And he's running against two other much more mainstream Republicans, John Thune and John Cornyn. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Trump has not endorsed anyone in this leadership race. Don't really expect him to at this point. It won't actually happen until November. Rick Scott doesn't have a lot of love, though, within the Republican caucus in the Senate. Remember, he was in charge of the Republican campaign machine 2 years ago when they lost the Senate. And there was a lot of angst about how he spent money, where he targeted resources, that Republicans had difficult candidates such as Herschel Walker in Georgia. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. A lot of it's going to hinge on what Trump does.
Yeah, a lot of question marks around this one. I love that. Bloomberg's Megan Scully, thank you. As we turn to, of course, the number one issue for most voters in this election, that's the economy. And the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index out this morning showing consumers tempering inflation expectations in the second half of May. Bloomberg's Amara Omeokwe joins us right now. Omeokwe, I should say. It's great to see you at the table. Welcome to Bloomberg, and thanks for joining us here. A lot of analysts on this program think that the UMich survey is a more important metric now than a lot of political polls. In that world, what is it telling us?
Well, it's telling us that consumers are still really occupied with this question of inflation. We have seen sentiment move down since the beginning of the year. That's in part because people are still unhappy with prices, but also people are starting to show a little bit more anxiety about the state of the labor market. They're starting to feel like perhaps things are getting a little bit more shaky. They're starting to notice that the Federal Reserve is talking about potentially holding interest rates higher for longer. And so all of those things are weighing on sentiment, and that really tracks with what we're seeing in the economy. We know the labor market has cooled. Employers have fewer openings. People are quitting their jobs less, which means they're less confident about going out into the labor market. And in the first quarter, we did see really disappointing inflation data, and that could mean that we have these higher borrowing costs for longer than many people thought when we were coming into 2024.
Election aside, doesn't all of this kind of mean that the Fed is actually doing its job? This is what it looks like to start slowing inflation, doesn't it?
Yeah, the Fed is doing its job. You hear many Federal Reserve officials talking about how they feel like what they've done with interest rates is working and is bringing inflation down. We have seen inflation cool off a lot. But again, that first quarter data were really discouraging, is what the Federal Reserve officials have said. And so they're not really content yet. Inflation isn't at their 2% target. And so they've said they're committed to getting it there. And so we could be here for longer.
We could be here for longer, even though the President of the United States predicted a rate cut.
Yes, he
did. A couple of weeks ago. Is he going to regret that?
It remains to be seen, right? The Fed officials are saying that they're going to be data dependent. They're going to look at the data and decide whether rate cuts are warranted and when they are warranted. But, you know, the Biden administration knows the economy and inflation are a challenge for them headed into the fall election.
Does he need a rate cut going into the election? That would signal mission accomplished without him having to say it, wouldn't it?
It would.
Politically speaking here.
It would.
I'm pulling you completely off of your economic beat today, and I hope you don't mind.
Yeah, but I think what you're going to see the Biden administration is say, look, like the Fed is going to do what it's going to do. We don't really talk about the Fed. We want them to be independent, and they're going to talk about the things that they feel are going well, right? We do have low unemployment. We've had unemployment under 4% for many, many months. We do still have the economy adding jobs at a steady pace. We still do have solid economic growth. So you hear the Biden administration talking a lot about that. You hear them talking a lot about the policies that they've implemented that they feel can help Americans both now and in the future, whether that be investments in infrastructure, student loan forgiveness that they've given thousands of Americans, working to lower prescription drug costs. Those are the things that they're going to be focusing on as we head into the fall.
We got minutes this week. What's the next indicator that gets you out of bed early that you care about?
We get some inflation data next week, the Fed's preferred metric. So we're going to be...
So PCE still reigns.
Of course. Yeah. So we're going to be watching.
We'll be watching. Come back and talk to us when we learn more about it. Bloomberg's Amara Omeokwe. Great to have you on board, and thank you for the insights today. Coming up, millions of people are expected to hit the road this Memorial Day weekend. Hope you have a long weekend. We'll look at the politics of high gas prices next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Thanks for joining us. More than 38 million of us are expected to hit the roads this Memorial Day weekend, a new record, according to AAA. The White House has its eyes on gas prices, with hopes to lower them as the summer driving season now gets underway. Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall has more on this. Tyler?
Yeah, hey, Joe, that's right. The Biden administration announced this week it's releasing 1 million barrels of gasoline from a reserve as part of a bid to lower prices this summer. It will take place in increments starting this weekend and go through the 4th of July. This reserve was established in the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy and was always meant to be offloaded. Though Congress mandated this release, the Energy Department says the sale is being timed to help ease pain at the pump during the summer holidays. But market experts like GasBuddy's lead petroleum analyst say this amounts to a small fraction of daily U.S. consumption and is unlikely to make a difference.
The White House already shutting down now the Northeast Strategic Gasoline Reserve. Of course, that was mandated by Congress. Trump tried to do it in 2020. But even that is not going to really move the needle. So the White House is just kind of along for the ride here, hoping that OPEC will continue the status quo and oil prices will continue to be under 80.
He was referencing what's seen as a crucial OPEC meeting next weekend, where production cuts are expected to be continued as oil prices fall. It's one factor in costs we pay at the pump, which data shows is up about 16% this year. But at the moment, gasoline prices are actually trending downward. The nationwide average is hovering around $3.61. That's lower than last month and about 5 cents higher from this time last year. Inflation and energy costs remain a top issue for Americans. Joe, as you know, our most recent Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll out this month finds a third of battleground voters say gasoline prices are their top economic concern.
Well, Tyler, this is going to be a big issue in this campaign cycle, of course, and we're already trying to follow the money from big oil to the candidates. What does it mean here in Washington?
Right. Well, Joe, this week, Senate Democrats announced an investigation into whether or not former President Trump allegedly engaged in a quid pro quo with big oil companies in exchange of rolling back regulations if elected in exchange for campaign donations. Now, the American Petroleum Institute, which represents some of the biggest names in big oil, like Exxon and Chevron, is calling this a political stunt. But as you know, this is a big issue for American consumers and American voters. So we'll have to see how it shakes out.
Well, stay on for us, Tyler. Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall with great reporting. We thank you. Coming up on Balance of Power, Israel has been ordered by the UN Court of Justice to end military operations in Rafah. We'll be joined by David Miliband, CEO of the International Rescue Committee, next on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Thanks for joining us. Israel has been ordered by the United Nations top court to halt all military operations in the Rafah region. I spoke earlier today with Congressman French Hill, Republican from Arkansas, shared his thoughts on that action. Take a listen.
I think that the international court in this instance is wrong. We're not a party to that treaty, so we don't even think highly enough of that organization to be a subscriber to it. And I think what we ought to recognize is that we don't want this conflict to get broader. We need humanitarian aid there.
For more on humanitarian aid, the need for relief in Gaza, we're joined by David Miliband, CEO of the International Rescue Committee. And David, it's great to have you back on Bloomberg. The International Rescue Committee, in fact, issued a statement about this ruling from the International Court of Justice. Quote, a halt in hostilities is exactly what is needed in Gaza right now. The start of your statement, is the court correct in this ruling?
Well, we speak to the humanitarian situation, not to the political situation. As a humanitarian agency, we can report to you on the situation on the ground, which is very grave indeed. There are mountainous levels of ill health in Gaza at the moment. It's a more densely populated area than New York City, twice as densely populated as New York City. And it's obviously suffered a high level of destruction. So the water infrastructure is broken. We also are finding it impossible to get our own staff in because the Rafah crossing is now closed. And so from our point of view, the imperative for a humanitarian drive is very, very high indeed. Ultimately, a ceasefire is the way to best service those enormous humanitarian needs. We certainly need, in any interim period, massively greater aid flows of food and water and fuel so that we can allow our aid workers, who also need to get in, to treat the wounded and to treat the sick.
Yeah. So I want to get to this, David, because we've heard reports of Hamas attacking relief convoys, stealing food. We've also heard reports, of course, of Israel blocking gates and preventing relief organizations from accessing Gaza. That's why we had to build a temporary pier that does not appear to be working terribly well at the moment. Are both parties responsible? Why cannot the aid get in?
Well, the aid can't get in, and people can't get in to deliver the aid because the entrances are blocked. That's the simple answer to your
question. So that begins with Israel in that answer.
Just a second. There are multiple entrances. The Kerem Shalom crossing, which is obviously controlled by Israel, it's from Israel into Gaza, that is open for commercial traffic, not for humanitarian aid, although there was an announcement today, very significant, after the call from President Biden to the Egyptian president, that humanitarian aid from Egypt will be routed through that crossing. That's some hope there. There is a Jordan crossing. That's delivering some support. But what I can speak to is the fact that the total of this effort is not delivering for the people, the civilians inside Gaza, who we want to treat and who until 2 weeks ago we were treating. The level of need is very, very high. And you'll have had reports on your own show about malnutrition, even famine warnings from members of the administration.
That's right.
And we're trying to stave off a genuine public health emergency where tens of thousands of people are at risk.
What assurances are you receiving from Israel that delivered aid gets to those who need it? Or are you not receiving those assurances?
Well, that isn't quite the way it works. The United Nations is in touch with the Israeli authorities. We, at the moment, can't get our aid workers in because the crossing for aid workers, the Rafah crossing, is closed. We have some local staff there. We have partners there, but there's no cash in the economy. So that's an enormous block on allowing people to at least buy whatever is available. You can imagine the circumstances there. And so we're dealing with really the inverse of what should be the humanitarian situation. The needs of the people, civilians, should come first, and it's the obligation of anyone in conflict to facilitate the delivery of the humanitarian aid. That is not happening at the moment. And from our point of view, the ultimate test is not about the number of trucks, it's about the food getting to the people. And that means crossing into Gaza and then being able to move within Gaza without fear that you're going to run into conflict.
Does Israel not need to be more flexible to get gates open and aid delivered? If I'm reading you correctly, this is the root of the problem.
Well, the gates that are controlled by Israel, which now includes the Rafah crossing, which has historically, during this conflict, been the humanitarian aid entry point, that is currently closed. And it's also the entry point for humanitarian aid workers. And so that is a fundamental responsibility that exists at the moment. I also want to emphasize that transit within Gaza is extremely difficult. Remember, 800,000 people have been moved out of Rafah, the city of Rafah, over the last 2.5 weeks. They've moved either to the coastal areas, Mawasi, or up into the middle of Gaza to already massively overcrowded areas of Khan Yunis and of Deir el-Balah. Now, these are massively overcrowded areas with no health or sanitary infrastructure. That's why there's such a public health emergency, never mind the conflict that's still going on around Rafah.
We saw snap elections announced in the UK this week, David. I'm not going to ask you what's going to happen there, but I wonder to what extent policy in Gaza will be on voters' minds.
I think it will be. The war in Gaza is a global issue, and Europe is obviously closer to the Middle East than the United States, geographically. And large numbers of people will have this in their minds. There's been a lot of coverage of it. There is a real yearning for some kind of solace for the civilians inside Gaza, while, of course, there is absolute horror of what happened in Israel on October the 7th. And so I think that the debate about foreign policy, which has historically not been a big part of elections, either in my country or in yours, it could well play. It's never going to be the dominant issue, except in really exceptional circumstances. But I think it will be discussed, and it deserves to be.
It's good to see you back, David Miliband. Thank you for the insights.
Thank you very much.
Reporting from on the ground. It's important to have these stories told. Coming up, swing state voters appear to be gaining trust in Vice President Kamala Harris. According to the new Bloomberg News Morning Consult swing state poll, we'll dig into it next with our panel on Balance of Power, Bloomberg TV and radio.
Hello, New York City, and hello to all of the incredible, tough, strong, hardworking American patriots right here in the Bronx. Who would think? Who would think? I'm here tonight to declare that we are going to turn New York City around, and we are going to turn it around very, very quickly.
The former president, Donald Trump, yes, in the Bronx, a rally yesterday in the traditionally deep blue state of New York. Joining us now, our political panel, Jeanne Zaino, Iona University political science professor, and now senior democracy fellow with the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress, and Lester Munson, co-head of international practice at BGR Group. Great to see you both here. New York City is at least deep blue. I guess we can debate New York State here, but come on, are we really talking about the Bronx or New York being in play for Donald Trump? People noted the difference in the demographics at that rally, but the MAGA hats were the same. How does this play out?
I think he should be looking to change New York strongly, not quickly. Okay. Personally, I would have chosen a different adverb there. Bigly and strongly. He's playing in Biden's turf. He's sending a message. He's expanding the map here. Now, he's probably not going to win New York, but it could be he'd be competitive in a place like Minnesota. In a place like Nevada, where Republicans haven't won for a very long time. I think he can. He's got some momentum. Certainly, the polls indicate he's doing well in these swing states. I think he's throwing down the gauntlet to the Biden folks.
Jeanne, did you ever think you'd hear the chant "Build that wall" in the Bronx?
No. You know, it used to be Jenny from the Bronx, right? Or I guess it was the block. Now it's Donnie from the Bronx.
Yes, it was.
You know, I know I'm getting my J-Lo stuff wrong. I'm sorry. You know, I think it was a smart political move. I mean, we haven't talked about what he said, and you just mentioned one thing, which was build the wall. But, you know, it's a smart political move. To Lester's point, you do need to expand the map. He is taking it to Joe Biden's base. He had a big, strong reception. He was up there for a long time speaking in the heat. He looked energized. All of that is true. And, you know, a lot of voting is about permission. You need to give people permission to consider voting for you. And while he may not win, I think he certainly won't win the Bronx. No, you know, nobody has won New York State as a Republican in a presidential election since Reagan. But he can give people permission in other swing states who are young African Americans, Latinos, to consider voting for him. So this is critical for a candidate. Joe Biden needs to do the same. Democrats need to be taking it to Florida. They're not going to win Florida, but they need to be talking about the issue, particularly of contraception and abortion, and take it to Donald Trump's base in places like that.
So a call to action for Joe Biden, whose vice president, his running mate, is doing pretty well in the latest polling. Kamala Harris joined Kenyan President William Ruto in a moderated conversation earlier that she discussed the future of U.S.-Kenya relations as she raises her profile at this stage of the campaign. Let's listen.
We have to revisit and revise the narrative around the relationship in a way that appreciates that ours, the role of the United States, should not be one of benevolence, but of thinking about the relationship in the context of partnership. So it is not about and simply about aid, but about investment.
Lester, nearly half of swing state voters, 48% in our morning consult Bloomberg poll, say they trust Kamala Harris to fulfill the duties of the presidency if Joe Biden were no longer able to serve. Could she end up being more popular than him on the trail in this cycle?
Well, she's got some vigor. She's got some youth on her side. She's an appealing person. She's charismatic. I would worry a little bit about her performance on stage and in front of the camera, I think they still need to do a little bit more work to get her up to speed. Her answer on Kenya there was quite good. She's entirely right about the policy. The delivery needs some work.
Okay. What do you think, Jeanne? Because a lot of folks had written off Kamala Harris, and now we see a number like this.
Yeah, I think this is a great example of somebody who's getting better and better. You know, she has been vice president now for 3 years. She has been crisscrossing the country of late, making impassioned pleas about issues she cares about. And you see her getting stronger. And the Bloomberg Morning Consult poll reflects that, particularly in the all-important swing states. And speaking of giving voters permission, we've even seen some people like comedians and other people of note, influencers, if you will, who have said publicly, you know, I had written you off to the vice president as somebody who didn't understand. But talking to you, hearing from you, I've changed my opinion. So that is all very important. I don't think it's going to change the trajectory of this candidacy and this race in particular. It's usually not when you're talking about VP nominees, but it is, I think, a good sign that she is getting better and better at what she is doing, and she's going to be a force in the Democratic Party come, you know, after Joe Biden.
Well, and her portfolio at the White House has certainly evolved into something that progressives are more passionate about. We'll keep tabs on this for you. Coming up, an inside look where the cameras have not been before. French ambassador to the U.S., Laurent Bili, takes us inside the wine cellar at his residence in Washington. An exclusive conversation about soft power in the Capitol. It's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio. Thanks for joining us. We saw international diplomacy on the highest level this week in Washington with the state visit of Kenyan President Ruto, complete with a state dinner at the White House last night that featured a 5-star menu and world-class wines from California and Oregon. But soft power, as they call it, is employed on a smaller scale every day in Washington, and not only at the White House. As I discussed with France's ambassador to the U.S., Laurent Bili, inside the wine cellar in the French ambassador's residence here in Washington, where soft power often comes with a glass of Bordeaux.
Most of what is happening is not around an official table. It's on the side talk, when you can really enter, when you can share what are the reasons behind your position on some issue. And that doesn't work on Visio. That's really when people are really connecting and exchanging, it works.
Wine is not just a tonic for diplomacy. It's also big business. The most recent statistics that we have seen value French wine exports at more than $17 billion, much larger than what we see in California, for instance, here in the United States. Is there room for growth in an industry that's as old as humankind?
There is newcomers in the wine industry, so it's.
How about for France?
For us, we are kind of mature economy and a mature market for the wine, and we have also strong rules to make sure that what we export is really the top quality. And so we can't, by example, expand some grapes variety in an area which will be close to Champagne, but don't have exactly the same kind of soil, the same kind of climate. We will have to create a new wine, but not try to sell something with a fancy name which doesn't fit the quality. So I'll say we really focus on quality more than expanding more quantities.
You're a self-described introvert. Does wine help with that?
It can, but when I refer to that, I was also comparing myself with some of my predecessors who were known in DC as being more extrovert and to throw a party. So yes, it helps, and because wine is also about bringing people together, conviviality. I don't mean to get drunk, but just to offer something that you like, to share a moment of, about good food, about good wine, about life. And I like that. And I like the small format also, which are more intimate. That's probably where I'm more introvert, that I prefer to a big party, a dinner when we have more time to exchange, to deepen relation.
The wine that we're drinking here, again, brings us to an area of France where the wineries are very small. Each bottle of wine tells a story. There's a family behind it. There's usually a story of enormous effort and hard work that goes behind it. That's part of the story of French culture.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the difference is that in these small farm, people will know exactly that on that hill, with the sun, the soil, they need to mix that one with that one which is more flat, but has got that particular taste. And thinking about my experience in Sancerre.
That's the essence of this, though, correct? You couldn't make the same wine 5 minutes later or 5 miles down the road. It's about what's happening right now, what's in the air.
And the knowledge that you have of your soil, of your grapes, and the way to make an assemblage of these different production.
Assemblage makes me think of champagne. Do you have time for bubbles?
I always have time to bubble. There's some really good bubble in France. And,
yes, there are.
And the bubble are not just bubble, it's also, again, that combination, experience, know-how, particular soil, particular climate, and of course, the variety of grapes.
I understand that you're clearly a wine fan, but you're from Brittany.
Yep.
Where cider might be first on the menu.
I have to confess that Brittany was more known for helping the wine industry to flourish in other regions than for its wine production. But I had my first connection really with wine a bit in the later part of my life. When I was a child, we were making our own cider. Once I remember we had one who was so powerful that it was exploding more than champagne. But we were not having that also tradition in the family. And so 1 year was good, 1 year was bad. So after a certain moment, my father decided to let the cider production to specialists.
It's probably best all the way around, I suspect. We'll leave the diplomacy to you and the winemaking to others. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for hosting us in the residence. I think it's time for a toast.
To a friendship.
Cheers. A conversation with the French ambassador to the U.S., Laurent Bili. Back with us, our political panel, Lester Munson and Jeanne, Zaino, who are not drinking wine this evening. But Lester, you spent a lot of time working in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. You know the importance of Embassy Row in this town. That little room that we just showed people is, in fact, where much diplomacy that matters takes place.
Très magnifique. Nice. Soft power is real.
Yeah.
The French are very good at it. They have assets, as you just saw. That others don't have. And it's a great way to kind of bring people together and talk about things. I think it's an excellent piece. And France is still relevant in the world today, perhaps because of wine.
How about that? Liquid assets, Jeanne, what do they mean for diplomacy?
Oui, Joe Matthew, you had a pretty good gig there. That's a way to kick off the Memorial Day weekend, and they mean a lot.
True. They do mean a lot. Thanks to Lester Munson and Jeanne Zaino. Cheers to you on your long weekend. I hope you both have one, as a matter of fact. And we'll be back, of course, with an important week, a shortened one, but an important week following the Memorial Day holiday next week. And I do hope that you'll join us right here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Check out the Washington Edition newsletter. In the meantime, it's on the terminal and online for all the stories that we've been talking about here, from soft power to the hard policy that we discussed earlier. You can find my full interview, by the way, with the ambassador from France on YouTube and on the terminal. Thanks for joining us on Balance of Power. We'll see you back here next week. Have a great holiday weekend. This is Bloomberg.